My son asked me a question once. He was standing at my apartment and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, why don't you love my mom? Why don't you live at the house with me and mommy?" Could you imagine that coming from a 3-year-old's mouth? Why don't you love my mom? I remember that moment like it was yesterday. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't ready for that question. And honestly, I didn't have an answer. Because how do you explain that to your child? How do you explain something that you haven't even been honest with yourself yet about? What's going on, YouTube family, and welcome back to the channel. So if you've been following this series, you know that I've been getting real about my marriage. And I've been talking about how I came close to almost losing it, and about how I was showing up as a provider, but not really as a husband. I'll be honest, sometimes it does seem easier to be a provider versus being a husband. And I've been talking a lot about that. I've also started talking about the reflection that started changing me. But today, I want to go somewhere that I haven't really gone yet on this channel. Because as painful as that entire season was for me and my wife, there was somebody else who was also watching the whole time. And it was actually more painful for them, I believe. That person is my son, my youngest son, TJ. And I think that that's a part where a lot of us men, we don't actually want to sit with. All right? We think about our marriages and we think about our own pain. We think about the pressure that we're carrying and the sacrifices that we're making or the sacrifices that we've made. But what about our kids? They're watching, right? They're taking all of this in. They're forming an understanding of what love actually looks like, what marriage looks like, and what actually a man or father does when things get hard. And TJ's question, "Dad, why don't you love my mom?" That's the moment I realized that my son was actually learning from watching me. He was learning what love looks like in his mind. And that's what I actually want to talk about on today. So, let me take you back to that moment. Because it didn't just hit me in that moment. It stayed with me. It's still with me right now. Talking about it is still bringing up a lot of emotions. TJ, he was at my apartment, and I want you to understand what I mean by that. My son, TJ, my best friend, he was visiting me, not living with me. He was visiting, because that's what it had become. I moved out, I had my own place, and my son, who used to be at my hip every single second, who used to run around the house screaming, "Dad, dad, 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 dad," for everything, he was now visiting me on weekends like I was somebody he had to make a schedule with or schedule time with. And he looked at me that day, this little curly-headed boy, and he asked me, "Dad, why don't you love my mom? Why don't you live with mommy? Why don't you live with me and mommy at the house?" And I just sat there. Because honestly, here's what hit me in that moment. My son, TJ, he wasn't asking me something that he had made up. He was asking me something that he had actually observed. He was asking me something that his little eyes had watched, that his little heart had tried to make sense of. Kids, they don't have words for what they're seeing. But they see it. They feel it. They know when something is wrong, even if they can't explain it. And TJ had watched his dad leave. He had watched his parents separate. He had watched something broken that he couldn't fix. And his little mind came up with the only thing that it could make sense to him, and that was that his dad must not love his mom. That's what it looked like to him. And I had to sit with that fact, that that's the life that I was living. That's the decision I was making. That I was teaching my son something about love that I had never intended to teach him. Honestly, I thought I was dealing with my own situation. But my son, he was in the middle of it. And I'll be honest, that wrecked me. Like, that truly messed with me. That messed with my head for a while. Because you can rationalize a lot of things as a man. You can tell yourself you're doing it for the right reasons. You can tell yourself that it's complicated. You can tell yourself that your wife doesn't understand the pressure that you're under. But your child asking you, why don't you love his mother? There's no rationalization for that. That's just the truth of what they see. And I want to ask you a question right now. If your child could see everything, your marriage, your effort, how you're actually showing up, what conclusion would they have, or would they be drawing for what love looks like? Because they're actually drawing one. Whether you're aware of it or not, they're drawing a conclusion, or they've already drawn one. See, here's the thing that I had to face after that moment. TJ, he wasn't wrong. And I don't mean I didn't love his mom, because I did, and I do. That was never the question. But the way I was showing up, the decisions I was making, it didn't look like love. Not to him. Not to his mom. And if I'm really being honest with myself, not even to me. Because honestly, here's something I haven't said publicly before. When I took that job in Texas, I didn't tell my wife the full truth about it. I told her it was going to be a quick job, just got to go out there and help out for a while. It was going to be a short assignment. And I knew that wasn't the truth. I knew it was going to be way longer than that. But I made that decision, and I made it without her. And I told her what I thought would keep the peace in that moment, instead of actually what it was and what was real. I was making decisions about our family's life, decisions that affected my wife, that affected TJ, that affected the entire home. And I wasn't bringing her into them. I was just doing what I thought was right. And I'll be honest, I expected her to follow. That's not a partnership. And that's not love. What that is, and what that was control dressed up as providing. And somewhere along the way, with all of that distance, all the physical distance and all the emotional distance, the distance I created by shutting her out of my decisions, my son ended up in my apartment with his dad on a weekend, trying to understand why his family looked the way that it did. And I did that. Not all of it. Because honestly, marriages are complicated, right? It's never just one person. But I contributed to that more than I wanted to admit. And TJ's question, it forced me to stop pretending otherwise. I want to talk about this for a second, because I think this is a part where a lot of men miss. We think our kids, we don't think that they're actually paying attention. We think that they're too young to understand. Honestly, we think that they're in their own little world. We think that they're into their games, their shows, their friends. And we think as long as they're fed, as long as they're safe, and as long as they have what they need, they're okay. But I'll tell you this, your kids are studying you every single day. They're learning from what a man does when things get hard. They're learning from what a man looks like, or what love looks like in a marriage to a man. They're learning what it means to stay or what it means to leave. They're actually learning what a husband is by watching you be one or watching you not be one. And here's what scared me when I really sat with that. My son, he was learning what happens when things get hard, that dad leaves. He was learning that dad's job matters more than being home. My son was learning that mom and dad don't choose each other. I never sat him down and taught him any of that. But that's what he was learning, because that's what he was actually seeing. And I had to ask myself, what do I want my son to learn from watching me? What do I want my daughter and my stepchildren to understand about what commitment looks like when it gets hard? Because they're not learning it from what I say. They don't learn anything from what we really say. They learn some, but they learn most of it from what we do. And that's what my kids were doing. They were learning from everything I did. And honestly, that's a heavy responsibility. And I wasn't carrying it. I wasn't carrying it the way I should be. But I want to tell you something different, because I don't just want to sit here and talk about the hard season. I don't want to just tell you all the hard stuff without telling you what changed. Not because I figured it all out or that everything is perfect, because it's not. My marriage is still not perfect. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I still get frustrated. I'm sure my wife still gets frustrated. Me and my wife, we're still trying to fall back in love this way that we once were. And that's real. That's still in progress. But here's what's different. Before, I made decisions alone. I made decisions and I didn't tell her about it until after the fact sometimes. Or I either made decisions and I told her a version of the truth that made it easier for me. I was honestly running my life and I was the only one running it. And that's all that mattered. All right? Now, before I make a decision, she knows about it. Before I make any move with my career, before I make any business decision, before anything that affects my family, we talk about it. I bring it to her. I get her input and I actually listen to it, because I realized that shutting her out of those different decisions, that wasn't protecting her. I'll be honest, a lot of times we call ourselves protectors, but in that same tune, we're actually disrespecting. And that's what I was doing. I was disrespecting her. I wasn't protecting her. It was telling her that her voice, it didn't matter in the life that we were supposed to be building together. But now we're actually building this life together. My wife, she's a writer. She's an author. She's constantly creating. And me, I'm building this channel. I'm building my coaching program. And we're talking about starting businesses together and separately. And we're planning our future for both of us, for our family, for our kids. And we make decisions as partners. That's what TJ gets to see now. He gets to see his dad and his mom in the same house making plans together. He gets to see his dad valuing his mom's opinion. He gets to see what it looks like when two people choose each other, just not on the good days, but through the hard ones too. And I'm not going to stand here and act like like he's erased what he actually saw before. I know he remembers it. I know there are things that season that it was put down on the inside of him, and we're probably still going to be working through that for a while. But what I can control is what he sees from here on out. And I'll tell you this, what he's going to see is a father who finally got it together. Not perfect, but present. That's also choosing his mom daily. That's what I want him to see. So if you're watching this and you know you're not showing up, you know you're not showing up the way that you should be showing up. If you're the man who knows something is wrong, but you've been telling yourself you'll deal with it later. If you've been hiding behind work like I was, if you've been hiding behind the pressure, your responsibilities, if you've been making decisions without your wife, if you've been shutting her out and telling yourself that you're protecting her when really you're just avoiding the hard conversations, I want you to hear me. Your kids, they're watching. They may not have the words like TJ had. They may not ask the same question that TJ asked me, but they're watching and they're learning. And right now, they're forming an understanding of what love looks like based on what they see in their actual house, what they see in their home. And the question isn't whether you love your family, because honestly, I know you do. Me personally, I never stopped loving mine. But the question is, what does it look like to them? Because love that's invisible or love that isn't visible to people you love, it isn't doing its job. I'll tell you this, you don't have to have it all figured out to start. You just got to start. You got to have the hard conversation. You got to have an honest conversation. You got to make the call. You got to go to the counseling sessions. You got to ask for help. You got to tell your wife the truth. And not just the truth, but the real truth. Not the version that keeps the peace. Because one day, your kids are going to look back at this whole season and they're going to remember. And I want you to be the reason that they have a different story to tell than the one that I almost had, or that I had with my son. And that was the whole basis of if I love their mom. I don't want you to have that same story that I left my son with. So I would start now if I was you. Not when it's easier. Not when you feel ready. But now. If any part of this hit home for you, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to drop the word present in the comments. And if TJ's question hits you, if you've got kids at home and they're watching you, I want you to drop the word watching in the comments. Because honestly, I do want to know. Because I know I'm not the only one that's gone through this or is going through this. And all we can do is help each other. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this with somebody who needs to hear it. Share it with a man, a woman, a brother, a friend, a coworker that might need this. So until the next time, later.